The Forgotten House. In the small town of Eldridge Hollow, nestled between dense woods and steep hills, stood an old abandoned house that was the subject of many local legends. It had been empty for over 50 years, its windows shattered, doors ajar, and the paint peeling like a forgotten memory. The townsfolk whispered tales of the family that once lived there, a family that had vanished without a trace. The story began in the summer of 1972 when the Grayson family moved into the house. Arthur Grayson, a jovial father, his wife, Margaret, and their two children, Emily and Luke, were eager to start a new life. They were drawn to the house's charm, completely unaware of its dark past. The previous owners had abandoned it abruptly, leaving behind furniture, toys, and even photographs that had begun to fade in the dim light. The first few weeks were pleasant. The Graysons painted the walls bright colors and filled the rooms with laughter. However, strange occurrences soon began to disrupt their happiness. It started with whispers, soft, unintelligible sounds echoing through the hallways at night. At first, the family brushed it off, thinking it was just the wind or the house settling, but soon the whispers grew louder, more distinct. Emily would hear her name being called, and Luke would often wake up to find the shadows in his room shifting unnaturally. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the house, Emily awoke to find a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed. She blinked, and it was gone, leaving only an eerie chill in the air. When she told her parents, they dismissed her fears, assuring her it was just a bad dream. Deep down, they could feel a growing unease within the walls of their home. Weeks turned into months, and the haunting escalated. Doors would slam shut on their own, objects would go missing only to reappear in bizarre places, and a feeling of dread hung heavily in the air. One evening, Margaret decided to dig into the house's history, hoping to understand what was happening. She visited the local library and unearthed an old newspaper article from the 1920s that detailed the disappearance of the Thompson family, the previous occupants of the house. According to the article, the Thompsons had lived in the house for just a year before they vanished without a trace. No bodies were found, and no explanations were ever given. Their disappearance had sparked rumors of ghostly activity, with locals claiming they had seen the family wandering through the woods at night, their faces twisted in agony. Margaret's heart raced as she realized that they had been living in the very house that had witnessed such a tragedy. That night, a violent storm swept through Eldridge Hollow, and the house seemed to come alive with malevolent energy. As thunder cracked and the winds howled, the Grayson family huddled in the living room, trying to find comfort in each other's presence. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the temperature plummeted. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic. Arthur stood up, determined to confront whatever was haunting them. "Who are you?" he shouted into the darkness, his voice trembling. "What do you want from us?" To his shock, the air grew colder, and a ghostly figure materialized before him, a woman in a tattered dress, her face gaunt and her eyes hollow. She pointed toward the staircase, and Arthur felt an overwhelming urge to follow her. The family watched in horror as he ascended the stairs, unable to stop him. "Dad, don't!" Emily screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the howling wind. Arthur reached the top, and the ghostly figure vanished. The air was thick with a suffocating silence. He turned to call out to his family when a heavy door slammed shut behind him, trapping him on the second floor. Panic washed over him as he desperately tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Downstairs, Margaret and the children were in a frenzy. They could hear their father's shouts growing fainter, drowned out by the storm. Just then, the whispers returned, clearer this time, almost pleading. "Help us, please." Margaret felt a strange connection to the voice and realized it was coming from the basement. Summoning her courage, she led Emily and Luke down the dark, creaky stairs. The air grew thick with despair, and shadows danced along the walls. At the bottom, they found a hidden door, partially ajar, a faint light flickering from within. "Stay close," Margaret instructed her children, pushing the door open. Inside, the basement was cluttered with old furniture and dusty relics. In the corner, an old, cracked mirror reflected their frightened faces. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and the whispers intensified. They felt a presence behind them, and as they turned, they saw the ghostly figure of the woman again, now accompanied by shadowy forms, the Thompsons. Their eyes were filled with sorrow, and their mouths moved as if trying to speak. Margaret's heart raced as she realized they were trapped in the mirror, their spirits bound to the house. "We're so sorry," she cried, her voice breaking. "What happened to you?" As if understanding her words, the spirits pointed toward the old trunk in the corner. Margaret rushed over, her heart pounding. With trembling hands, she opened the trunk, revealing old belongings: family photos, letters, and a small, tarnished locket. With a shudder, she picked up the locket and opened it, revealing a picture of the Thompson family. "You're trapped because of this," she said, her voice trembling. "You need to be freed." At that moment, the house shook violently, and a thunderous roar filled the air. Arthur's voice echoed from upstairs, desperate and terrified. "Margaret! Emily! Luke! Get back to him!" The spirits pleaded, their faces twisted in pain. "We are lost. Help us find peace." With a surge of determination, Margaret grabbed her children's hands and led them back up the stairs. They rushed to the second floor, finding Arthur still struggling against the locked door. With a final push, Margaret threw her weight against it, and the door flew open. Arthur stumbled out, breathless and pale. "What happened?" he gasped, looking at his family, who were now trembling but resolute. "We need to help them," Margaret said urgently, holding up the locket. "They're trapped here!" "We have to let them go." The family gathered together, forming a circle in the center of the living room. As they held hands, they focused on the locket, whispering a prayer for the Thompsons. The room grew cold again, and the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. Suddenly, a blinding light engulfed them, and they felt a rush of wind sweep through the house. The ghostly figures appeared once more, their faces softening as they began to fade. "Thank you," they whispered in unison before vanishing into the light. In an instant, the house fell silent. The oppressive weight that had loomed over the Graysons lifted, and the atmosphere became warm and inviting once more. They stood together, shaken but relieved, knowing they had finally set the trapped spirits free. From that day on, the Grayson family no longer felt haunted. They made the old house their home, filling it with love and laughter. The stories of the Thompsons faded into legend, and Eldridge Hollow found peace at last. But the old house remained a reminder of the past, standing tall amidst the trees, a testament to the power of love and the lingering echoes of those long forgotten.
Story number 2.
The Haunting of Hollow Creek. In the heart of a forgotten valley surrounded by dense woods and swirling mists lay the small village of Hollow Creek. The village had seen better days, with its cobbled streets cracked and its once vibrant homes now draped in vines and shadows. The townspeople often whispered about an old abandoned mansion on the outskirts, known as the Blackwood Manor. The mere mention of it sent shivers down the spine of anyone who dared to talk about its dark history. Years ago, the manor was the grandest home in Hollow Creek, owned by the enigmatic Blackwood family. They were wealthy, influential, and had an air of mystery about them. However, one fateful night, tragedy struck. A fire consumed the mansion, claiming the lives of the entire Blackwood family. Some said it was an accident. Others whispered that the family had dabbled in dark magic, angering spirits that haunted the valley. The truth was buried in the ashes, and the mansion became a husk of its former glory, a place shunned by all. But curiosity has a way of luring the brave or the foolish. One autumn evening, a group of teenagers, Mia, Jake, Sam, and Lily, decided to explore the infamous manor. They were tired of the mundane life in Hollow Creek and yearned for an adventure that would make their lives exciting, or at least provide them with a good story to tell. Armed with flashlights and a sense of bravado, they set off toward the looming structure, the sun setting behind them and casting long, eerie shadows. As they approached Blackwood Manor, a chill enveloped them, and the wind whispered warnings through the trees. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the creaking of the old iron gate as they pushed it open. The overgrown garden was a wild tangle of thorns and weeds, and the mansion itself towered over them like a sentinel of despair, its windows dark and hollow. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" Lily hesitated, glancing back at the village, the warm glow of lights fading into the distance. "Come on, it'll be fun," Jake said, his bravado unwavering. "What's the worst that could happen?" With that, they stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning beneath their weight. The front door was slightly ajar, and they exchanged nervous glances before entering the mansion. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of decay. Dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights as they illuminated the grand but crumbling foyer. The walls were adorned with tattered wallpaper, and portraits of the Blackwood family hung crookedly, their eyes seemingly following the teenagers as they moved. Mia shivered, feeling as if she were being watched. "Let's stick together," she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. They explored the ground floor, moving through rooms filled with broken furniture, shattered glass, and remnants of a life once lived. They took turns cracking jokes, trying to lighten the mood, but the eerie atmosphere hung heavy in the air. As they ventured deeper into the mansion, they stumbled upon a narrow staircase leading to the basement. "Do you think we should go down there?" Sam asked, peering into the dark abyss. "Absolutely," Jake replied, his enthusiasm undeterred. "It's probably where all the cool stuff is." Reluctantly, they descended the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in a dimly lit room filled with old furniture covered in dusty sheets. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface marred with age but still somehow captivating. "Check this out!" Mia exclaimed, moving closer to the mirror. As she peered into it, she gasped. "There's something in it!" The others crowded around her, their flashlights illuminating the glass. For a moment, the reflection seemed to shimmer, and they could see the outline of a figure behind them, a woman in a flowing white gown, her hair cascading like a waterfall. But when they turned, there was no one there. "Did you see that?" Lily's voice trembled, her eyes wide with fear. "Just a trick of the light," Jake dismissed, though he too felt a tingle of apprehension creeping up his spine. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped, and an icy wind howled through the basement. The door slammed shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as they scrambled to find a way out. "Jake, what did you do?" Sam shouted, his voice echoing in the enclosed space. "I didn't do anything," Jake replied, his bravado slipping away. "Just help me find a way out." Mia rushed back to the mirror, feeling drawn to it. "Look," she cried, pointing. The reflection now showed the room behind them, but it was different, darker, with shadows flickering at the edges. And there, in the corner, stood the woman in white, her face obscured but her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. As they watched in horror, the woman raised her hand and the room seemed to shudder. "Help me, help me," her voice echoed, a soft whisper that resonated within their minds. "We need to get out of here," Lily screamed, pulling at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation surged through them as the whispers grew louder, swirling around like a tempest. The mirror pulsed with energy, and the woman's figure began to materialize, her expression one of sorrow and pain. "Please," she whispered, reaching out toward them. "You must free me. What do you want from us?" Mia cried, her heart racing. "Find the truth of the fire." The woman's voice became more frantic, and the room shook violently. In that moment, they realized that the woman was not a malevolent spirit, but a victim of the tragedy that had occurred within these walls. They needed to uncover the secrets of Blackwood Manor to help her find peace. Okay, Jake shouted, desperation fueling his courage. "We'll help you." Suddenly, the basement was illuminated with blinding light, and the mirror shattered, shards scattering across the floor. The wind howled, pulling at their clothes, and in the chaos, the door swung open, revealing a path back to the stairs. They rushed up, their hearts pounding, and found themselves in the foyer once more. But the house felt different now, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. They gathered their wits, and together they vowed to uncover the truth behind the fire. After leaving the manor, they spent the next few weeks researching the Blackwood family. They dug through old records, interviewed townsfolk, and pieced together the horrifying story of the fire that had taken so many lives. It turned out that the Blackwoods had been accused of witchcraft by jealous neighbors, leading to the tragic events that unfolded that night. Armed with this knowledge, they returned to the manor one last time, holding a small memorial for the lost souls. They spoke the names of the Blackwood family, honoring their memory and the injustice they had suffered. As they finished, a gentle breeze swept through the house, and they felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The whispers that had once echoed through the halls faded into silence, replaced by a warm light that enveloped them. In that moment, they knew they had freed the spirits trapped within the mansion. As they left the manor for the final time, the sun broke through the clouds, illuminating the path before them. Hollow Creek was a little brighter that day, forever changed by the bravery of 4 teenagers who had dared to confront the darkness. And so the tale of the Blackwood Manor transformed from one of fear to one of redemption, a reminder that even the most haunted places can find peace when the truth is revealed. Story the end.
Story number 3.
Shakar Sharb, The Whispers of Maple Grove. In the quaint town of Maple Grove, autumn painted the trees in shades of crimson and gold, but the beauty of the season was overshadowed by a chilling tale that echoed through the streets. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the old Maple Grove Asylum, which had been abandoned for decades. The imposing building, with its crumbling stone walls and broken windows, stood as a monument to a dark history that had been all but forgotten. The asylum had been operational in the early 1900s, housing those deemed mentally ill. Its walls had witnessed unspeakable horrors, experimentations, neglect, and cruelty that left scars on the souls of its inhabitants. One particularly notorious figure was Dr. William Mercer, the head physician known for his unorthodox methods that crossed the line into madness. Rumors swirled that he had conducted gruesome experiments in the name of science, leaving many patients in torment. After a fire mysteriously consumed a wing of the asylum, it was shut down, leaving behind the whispers of those who once roamed its halls. As Halloween approached, a group of friends, Emma, Kyle, Sarah, and Jake, decided to explore the asylum, drawn by the thrill of uncovering its secrets. They gathered supplies, flashlights, a first aid kit, and a camera, eager to document their adventure. Emma, the unofficial leader of the group, was fascinated by the paranormal and had read countless stories of haunted places, while Kyle had his doubts about the existence of ghosts. "Come on, it's just an old building," he scoffed as they approached the entrance, the air thick with unease. "There's no such thing as ghosts. Then why are you so scared?" Sarah teased, nudging him playfully. As they pushed open the heavy, rusted door, it creaked ominously, and a chill swept over them. Dust motes danced in the dim beam of their flashlights as they entered the lobby, where the remnants of the asylum lay scattered. Old medical equipment, torn furniture, and patient records littered the floor, whispering tales of despair and suffering. "Let's split up and meet back here in an hour," Emma suggested, her excitement palpable. "I don't think that's a good idea," Jake warned, glancing nervously around. "What if something happens?" "It'll be fine," Emma reassured him. "We'll be able to cover more ground." Reluctantly, the group agreed, and they ventured off into different wings of the asylum. Emma and Sarah headed toward the patient ward, while Kyle and Jake made their way to the basement, where the experiments were rumored to have taken place. As Emma and Sarah explored the ward, the air felt heavy with sorrow. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, and a sense of foreboding settled over them. In one room, they found a rusted gurney, and on the wall, strange markings had been etched. Desperate scribbles of former patients. "Do you think they were trying to communicate?" Sarah wondered, tracing her fingers over the faded marks. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic surged as they fumbled to turn them back on, and when the lights flickered back to life, they found themselves surrounded by a thick fog that seemed to pulse with energy. "Did you see that?" Emma gasped, her heart racing. Before Sarah could answer, a soft whisper echoed around them, faint but chilling. "Help me, please." "Who's there?" Emma called, her voice trembling. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest, and shadows danced in the corners of the room. The atmosphere grew heavy, and a figure materialized, a gaunt woman in a tattered hospital gown, her face a mask of despair. "Help me," she pleaded, her voice barely audible. Emma and Sarah exchanged horrified glances. "We need to get out of here!" Sarah screamed, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Meanwhile, in the basement, Kyle and Jake felt a similar dread as they navigated through the damp, dark corridors. The air was thick with mildew and decay, and the oppressive silence felt alive. They found a room filled with old medical instruments, tools of torment that made their skin crawl. "What do you think they did here?" Jake whispered, his voice laced with unease. Before Kyle could respond, the lights flickered, and the room seemed to close in around them. A loud bang echoed from behind, causing them to jump. They turned to see a shadow darting past the doorway. "Did you see that?" Kyle exclaimed, his bravado shattered. "Let's get out of here," Jake urged, but as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut, and the temperature plummeted. They pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. Back in the patient ward, Emma and Sarah were still trapped with the ghostly figure. "Please, help me find peace," the woman cried, her eyes wide with desperation. "I was left here to die. What do you need us to do?" Emma asked, her heart racing. The ghost pointed toward the old gurney. "You must know the truth about Dr. Mercer. He must be stopped." Just then, a loud crash echoed through the asylum, shaking the very foundation of the building. The whispers grew frantic, swirling into a cacophony of voices. In the basement, Kyle and Jake struggled against the door, but it wouldn't yield. "We need to find another way out," Kyle shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Suddenly, a cold hand gripped Kyle's shoulder, and he spun around to find a ghostly figure standing behind him, an old man with hollow eyes and a sinister grin. "You shouldn't be here," the figure hissed, his voice echoing with malice. "Leave now, while you still can." Desperate, Jake yelled, "What do you want from us?" "Your souls will feed the hungry," the figure replied, his voice dripping with malice. "The doctor demands his due." As the old man advanced, the door finally flew open, and they stumbled out into the hallway. They ran blindly, fear propelling them forward until they found themselves back at the lobby, breathless and terrified. "Where's Emma and Sarah?" Kyle gasped, looking around. "They went to the patient ward," Jake shouted. "We have to find them!" They raced back to the ward stays, calling out for their friends. When they burst into the room, they found Emma and Sarah huddled together, pale and shaken. "What happened?" Jake asked, eyes wide with concern. "We saw a ghost," Emma exclaimed, her voice shaky. "She wants us to help her." "The old man said we shouldn't be here," Kyle added, still reeling from his encounter. "We need to find out what happened to her," Sarah said, her voice steadying. "It's the only way to stop this." As they regrouped, the whispers intensified, now a deafening roar. "Help us! Free us!" Determined to uncover the truth, they made their way to the old library, where records of the asylum's past were kept. As they searched through the dusty files, they found a report detailing the unethical practices of Dr. Mercer. It described how he had conducted inhumane experiments on patients, including the woman they had seen. He was trying to create a way to cure mental illness, Emma read aloud, her voice trembling. But he only brought suffering. With newfound determination, they decided to confront the spirit of Dr. Mercer. They returned to the basement, where they felt the energy pulsing, heavy with malevolence. "Dr. Mercer!" Emma shouted, her voice ringing through the darkness. "We know what you did. You can't hide anymore." The air crackled with energy as the ghostly figure of Dr. Mercer materialized, his eyes filled with rage. "You dare speak my name?" he thundered, the walls shaking around them. "We're here to put an end to your torment," Sarah declared, stepping forward. "You can't keep these souls trapped here." The doctor's laughter echoed ominously. "You think you can stop me? I control this place." In that moment, the ghostly woman appeared beside them, her eyes fierce with determination. "You will not take them. I will not let you." The room filled with a blinding light as the spirits of the asylum's victims emerged, surrounding Dr. Mercer. The walls shook violently as the doctor screamed in fury, but the spirits grew stronger, their voices rising in a chorus of freedom. "Help us find peace," they cried, and the power of their collective anger and sorrow shattered the darkness that enveloped the asylum. With a final, ear-piercing shriek, Dr. Mercer was consumed by the light, and the room fell silent. The oppressive weight that had hung over the asylum lifted, replaced by a profound sense of calm. Emma, Kyle, Sarah, and Jake stood together, breathless and shaken. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, freeing the souls that had been trapped for so long. As they made their way outside, the sun began to rise, casting a golden light over Maple Grove. The asylum, once a place of despair, stood in silence. The whispers finally quieted. From that day on, the people of Maple Grove spoke of the brave teenagers who confronted the darkness of the asylum and freed the trapped souls. The town was forever changed, and the old Maple Grove Asylum became a symbol of hope and redemption.
Story number 4.
The Curse of Willow Creek. In the small town of Willow Creek, nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, the locals spoke in hushed tones about a dark legend that haunted the town for generations. It was said that a malevolent spirit known as the Widow of Willow Creek roamed the woods, seeking vengeance on those who dared to disturb her resting place. The tale began many years ago when a woman named Eliza Hawthorne lived in the town. Beautiful and beloved, she married the man of her dreams, Thomas, and together they built a life filled with love and happiness. But fate turned cruel when Thomas was killed in a tragic accident while working in the nearby mines. Eliza was heartbroken, and in her grief she wandered into the woods, searching for any sign of her lost love. Days turned into weeks, and Eliza never returned. The townsfolk searched for her, but it was as if she had vanished into thin air. Eventually, they found her lifeless body near the old oak tree at the heart of the woods. Grief-stricken, they buried her under the tree. But rumors began to spread that her spirit lingered, seeking revenge on the living for the love she had lost. The legend grew over the years, warning that anyone who dared to enter the woods after dark would face the wrath of the widow. Many claim to have seen her ghostly figure wandering among the trees, her mournful cries echoing through the night. As Halloween approached, a group of high school friends, Mark, Rachel, Tim, and Lisa, decided to test the legend. They were intrigued by the tales and wanted to experience the thrill of the supernatural. One chilly evening, armed with flashlights and an insatiable curiosity, they ventured into the heart of the woods, determined to find the old oak tree where Eliza was buried. As they made their way deeper into the forest, the trees loomed overhead, casting long shadows that danced in the flickering light of their flashlights. The air was thick with anticipation, and a sense of unease settled over them. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Rachel asked, glancing nervously around. "It's just a story," Mark replied, trying to sound confident. "Besides, we're here for a little adventure." They pressed on, laughing and joking to mask their growing fear. After walking for what felt like hours, they finally stumbled upon the clearing where the ancient oak stood, its gnarled branches stretching skyward like skeletal fingers. The sight sent chills down their spines, and for a moment they stood in silence, taking in the eerie beauty of the scene. "Let's take a picture," Tim suggested, pulling out his phone. As they gathered around the tree, an unsettling breeze rustled the leaves, causing them to shiver. They snapped a photo, and when they looked at the screen, they were horrified to see a shadowy figure hovering just behind them. "Did you see that?" Lisa gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "It's just a trick of the light," Mark said, though his voice wavered. But as they continued to take pictures, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavier, and the once cheerful banter faded into an uncomfortable silence. Suddenly, a mournful wail pierced the night, echoing through the trees. "Did you hear that?" Rachel whispered, her voice trembling. "Yeah, it sounded like a woman crying," Tim said, his bravado slipping. "We should go," Lisa urged, glancing nervously at the path they had come from. As they turned to leave, a cold wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic set in as they scrambled to turn them back on, but the darkness enveloped them, making it nearly impossible to see. "Stay together," Mark shouted, but the fear in his voice was evident. The wailing grew louder, reverberating through the trees. They felt an overwhelming presence surrounding them, suffocating and oppressive. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerged. A woman in a flowing white dress, her face obscured by a veil. The friends froze in terror, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. The figure pointed a skeletal finger toward the old oak tree, her eyes burning with sorrow and anger. "Leave this place," she wailed, her voice echoing with centuries of pain. Without thinking, the friends turned and bolted into the woods, the sound of their pounding hearts drowning out the wails that chased them. Branches clawed at their clothes as they ran blindly through the darkness, the path ahead seemingly endless. "Where's the way out?" Rachel cried, panic rising in her voice. "I don't know. Just keep running," Mark shouted, desperately trying to lead them through the maze of trees. As they stumbled and tripped over roots and underbrush, the wails turned to laughter. A chilling, mocking sound that echoed through the woods, sending shivers down their spines. The trees seemed to close in around them, making it impossible to tell which direction they were heading. Finally, they broke free of the dense forest and emerged into a clearing bathed in moonlight. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. "We need to get back to town," Lisa said, her voice shaky. "Now." As they gathered their bearings, the laughter faded into the distance, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. But as they turned to leave, they noticed something horrifying. The shadow of the old oak tree looming behind them, but it was not the tree they had seen before. It was twisted and dark, pulsating with an unnatural energy. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the shadows began to writhe. From the depths of the darkness, a multitude of ghostly figures emerged, had their faces twisted in anguish. They surrounded the group, closing in, their hollow eyes filled with rage. "Why have you disturbed us?" One figure moaned, its voice a haunting echo. "You cannot escape our fate." Mark stepped forward, his heart racing. "We didn't mean to disturb anyone. We were just curious." "Curiosity has its price," another ghost hissed, its voice cold as ice. "You must pay for the trespass." The friends looked at one another, fear paralyzing them. Just then, a soft voice broke through the chaos. "Please, help me." The ghostly figure of Eliza Hawthorne emerged from the crowd, her expression a mix of sadness and desperation. "I do not wish to harm you. I seek only peace." "How can we help you?" Rachel pleaded, stepping closer. Eliza pointed to the old oak tree. "You must uncover the truth of my death. Only then will my spirit find rest." As the shadows closed in, the friends felt a surge of determination. They couldn't let fear dictate their fate. "We'll help you," Mark shouted, his voice steady. "We'll find out what happened." With Eliza's guidance, they turned back toward the oak tree. As they approached it, they noticed a strange marking on the trunk, an inscription that seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. "In life I loved, in death I seek solace," Tim read aloud. "The townsfolk buried me here, but they buried my truth with me," Eliza said, her voice filled with sorrow. "You must reveal the truth to the living." Determined, the friends made their way back to town, vowing to dig deeper into Eliza's story. They visited the library, combing through old newspapers and town records. After days of research, they uncovered a chilling truth. Eliza had not died from natural causes. She had been wrongfully accused of witchcraft by jealous townsfolk who coveted her beauty and fortune. On Halloween night, they returned to the clearing with a candle and a small altar honoring Eliza's memory. They recited her story to the townsfolk who had gathered, revealing the truth that had been buried for so long. As they finished, the air around them shimmered and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. The shadows that had once haunted the woods began to fade, replaced by a warm light that enveloped the clearing. Eliza's spirit appeared, her face now radiant with peace. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing like a gentle breeze. "You have set me free." With a final smile, her figure dissipated into the light, and the woods fell silent. The curse of Willow Creek finally lifted. From that day on, the townspeople spoke of the brave friends who uncovered the truth of the widow of Willow Creek, transforming a tale of tragedy into one of redemption and hope. Story the end.
Story number 5.
The haunting of Hollow Hill. In the shadow of Hollow Hill, a place steeped in eerie folklore and dark legends, lay the small town of Brooksville. For generations, the townsfolk whispered of a curse that plagued the hill, warning outsiders to steer clear. It was said that the spirits of those who had perished there lingered, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared to trespass. The origin of the curse dated back to the 1800s, when a tragic accident took the lives of several children playing near the edge of a cliff. Their laughter echoed through the woods until the day a storm rolled in, sending a landslide crashing down and sealing their fate. The townsfolk, wrought with grief, buried the children at the foot of Hollow Hill, but their restless spirits never found peace. As the years passed, strange occurrences began to plague those who lived near the hill. Livestock went missing, ominous shadows flitted through the trees, and blood-curdling screams echoed at night. The legend grew, and a sense of dread hung in the air. One summer evening, a group of 4 friends, Jack, Emily, Sam, and Mia, decided to test the legend of Hollow Hill. They were thrill-seekers, always on the lookout for a scare. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they set off toward the hill excited for a night of adventure. As they hiked up the winding path, a thick fog enveloped them, swirling like a living entity. The air grew colder, and an unsettling silence settled over the forest, causing the hairs on the back of their necks to stand on end. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Mia asked, glancing nervously at the darkened trees. "Come on, it's just a story," Jack replied, trying to mask his own unease. "We'll prove that there's nothing to be afraid of." As they reached the summit, the moon cast an eerie glow over the landscape. The view was breathtaking, but a sense of foreboding hung in the air. They gathered near the edge of the cliff where the wind howled mournfully, as if echoing the cries of the lost children. "Let's take a picture for proof," Sam suggested, pulling out his phone. They huddled together, laughter bubbling up as they posed at the cliff's edge. But as the flash went off, a chilling gust swept through, and the sound of distant giggles reached their ears. The laughter was innocent and joyous, but felt out of place in the dark night. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Probably just the wind," Jack said, though doubt crept into his mind. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. The friends stumbled, barely managing to stay on their feet. The laughter grew louder, transforming into desperate cries for help that pierced the stillness of the night. "Let's get out of here," Mia shouted, panic rising in her voice. As they turned to flee, the fog thickened, obscuring their path. Shadows darted through the trees, and the cries morphed into a chorus of wails that sent chills down their spines. "Run!" Jack yelled, leading the way back down the hill. They raced through the forest, branches clawing at their clothes, their flashlights flickering as the darkness closed in around them. The cries grew more frantic, and the fog twisted into ghostly figures that floated just out of reach. "Help us!" they cried, their voices filled with sorrow. "We have to find a way out!" Sam shouted, his heart pounding. The friends stumbled through the underbrush, but the trail had vanished. Every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into the woods, the cries echoing louder and louder. "Is this a prank?" Mia yelled, her voice trembling. "This isn't funny. No one is messing with us." Jack snapped back, fear evident in his eyes. "We have to keep moving." Finally, they burst into a clearing, gasping for breath. In the center stood a decrepit old house, its windows shattered and the door hanging on its hinges. The sight sent shivers down their spines, but the cries of the children echoed in their ears, urging them to help. "We should check it out," Sam suggested, glancing at the others. "Maybe we can find a way to put the spirits to rest." "Are you crazy?" Mia shouted, shaking her head. "That place looks cursed. Do you want to keep running, or do you want to confront whatever is haunting us?" Jack countered, determination flaring in his eyes. Reluctantly, the group moved toward the house, the air thick with tension. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped and a sense of dread enveloped them. The floorboards creaked under their weight, and dust danced in the beams of their flashlights. "Look!" Emily pointed to a wall covered in faded photographs of the children who had perished. "This must be them." Tears filled her eyes as she traced the faces with trembling fingers. "We need to help them." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them, and a chilling wind swept through the room. The children's laughter echoed once more, but now it sounded twisted and filled with anguish. "Help us! Please!" The friends huddled together, fear gripping their hearts. "What do we do?" Mia whispered, her voice shaking. "We have to listen," Jack said, taking a deep breath. "They want us to understand." As if on cue, a figure materialized in the corner of the room, a translucent girl with long hair and sad eyes. "You must know the truth," she whispered, her voice echoing with pain. "What truth?" Emily asked, stepping forward. "The adults betrayed us," the girl said, her voice trembling. "They were afraid of us. They buried us alive in the landslide, and no one came to save us." The friends exchanged horrified glances as the realization hit them. "They thought you were gone," Sam said, his voice barely audible. "They left us to die," the girl wailed, tears streaming down her ethereal face. "Please, help us find peace." Jack stepped forward, determination etched on his face. "How can we help you?" "Tell the town what happened," the girl implored. "Let them know we were innocent. We deserve to be remembered." Suddenly, the walls shook, and the cries of the children rose to a deafening crescendo. The shadows surged around them, and the air thickened with desperation. "Do it now," the girl urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. Gathering their courage, the friends agreed to return to Brooksville and tell the story of the children. They fled the house, racing back through the woods, the fog lifting as they neared the town. Once they reached the safety of the streets, they rushed to the town hall, where a meeting was being held. The townsfolk turned to them in surprise as they burst through the doors. "Please, we have something important to share," Jack shouted, breathless. The townspeople exchanged curious and skeptical looks, but they continued. The friends recounted their harrowing experience and revealed the truth of the children's tragic fate. As they spoke, the air grew heavy with emotion. The townsfolk listened, their faces a mix of shock and sorrow. When the friends finished, a hush fell over the room. "I remember that night." An elderly man finally spoke, his voice trembling. "I was one of the people who thought they were gone. We were wrong, so very wrong." Tears filled the eyes of the townsfolk as they realized the weight of their neglect. That night, a vigil was held at Hollow Hill, where candles were lit in memory of the lost children. The friends stood together, feeling the spirit's presence surrounding them, their cries finally fading into peace. As the flickering candles illuminated the hill, a soft breeze whispered through the trees, carrying the laughter of the children, a sound that had long been silenced but now echoed with joy. From that day forward, Hollow Hill became a place of remembrance, not fear. The townsfolk vowed never to forget the tragic past and to honor the spirits that had once been lost. The curse was lifted, and the laughter of the children rang through the forest, forever a reminder of the power of truth and redemption. Story the end.
Story number 6.
The Locket of Lost Souls. In the quaint town of Eldridge Hollow, nestled between misty mountains and dense forests, there stood an old antique shop known as Grayson's Curiosities. The shop was filled with relics from a bygone era, dusty books, ornate furniture, and strange artifacts that seemed to whisper secrets of the past. But one item in particular had a dark reputation, an old silver locket said to be cursed. Legend had it that the locket once belonged to a young woman named Annabelle, who tragically vanished without a trace. Heartbroken, her family searched the woods surrounding Eldridge Hollow, but she was never found. Rumors swirled that Annabelle's spirit remained tethered to the locket, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to possess it. Despite the warnings, a curious college student named Sarah ventured into Grayson's curiosities one rainy afternoon. The moment she stepped inside, she was captivated by the locket, its intricate design glinting in the dim light. As she picked it up, a chill raced down her spine, but she brushed it off as a draft from the door. "Ah, you found the locket of Annabelle," Mr. Grayson, the shopkeeper, said, emerging from the shadows. His voice was raspy and low. "It's said to hold a tragic history. Many have tried to buy it, but it brings nothing but misfortune." "Misfortune? It's beautiful," Sarah replied, her curiosity piqued. "How much?" Mr. Grayson hesitated, studying her. "I'll let you have it for a good price, but you must heed my warning. The locket is not just an ornament. It's a vessel for lost souls." Ignoring his words, Sarah purchased the locket, her excitement overshadowing the ominous warnings. As she left the shop, a sense of foreboding enveloped her, but she shrugged it off. The locket felt warm against her skin, and she believed it would bring her good luck. That night, Sarah placed the locket on her nightstand, admiring its beauty under the soft glow of her lamp. As she drifted off to sleep, a strange sensation filled the room. She dreamt of a girl in a flowing white dress, standing in the woods, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Help me, please," the girl whispered, reaching out with a trembling hand. Sarah woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream felt so real, she dismissed it, without attributing it to the locket. Over the next few days, however, strange things began to happen. Shadows flickered at the corners of her vision, and whispers echoed in her ears when she was alone. Her friends noticed the change in her. "You seem distant, Sarah. Are you okay?" asked Mia, her best friend. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, but the unease gnawed at her. The locket had become an obsession. She wore it every day, convinced it was a talisman of good fortune. But the more she wore it, the more unsettling occurrences unfolded. One evening, while studying alone in her room, she heard a soft thumping sound coming from the closet. Her heart raced as she approached the door. "Is someone there?" she called, but silence answered. She slowly opened the door, revealing only a pile of clothes. Relieved, she chuckled nervously and turned away. That's when she heard it, a soft, sorrowful cry. "Help me!" Panic surged through her. She rushed to her phone and called Mia. "You need to come over." "Something's wrong. I can hear a voice." Within minutes, Mia arrived, breathless and worried. "What's going on, Sarah?" "I keep hearing this voice. I think it's coming from the locket," Sarah explained, her hands trembling. Mia looked skeptical. "You've been under a lot of stress. Maybe it's just your imagination." "No, it's real," Sarah insisted, her eyes wide with fear. "I'm not crazy, I promise." That night, they decided to investigate the locket further. They scoured the internet for information about Annabelle and discovered a chilling story. Annabelle was last seen near the woods, chasing a mysterious figure that had been haunting her dreams. "Maybe she's trying to tell you something," Mia suggested. "What if she needs help finding out what happened to her?" Determined to uncover the truth, they ventured into the woods the following day. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows among the trees. As they walked deeper into the forest, Sarah felt a strange pull toward a specific path that seemed to beckon her. "Are you sure about this?" Mia asked, glancing around nervously. "I have to know," Sarah replied, her voice steady. They followed the path until they reached a clearing where they found an ancient, weathered tree. At its base lay a small, crumbling gravestone, half covered in moss. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she read the inscription. "Annabelle Grace, beloved daughter, lost too soon." Tears filled her eyes as she knelt beside the grave. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her heart heavy with sorrow. "What happened to you?" As if in response, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves and causing the locket around Sarah's neck to glow faintly. "Help me. Find peace," the voice echoed once more, clearer this time. "Annabelle?" Sarah gasped, clutching the locket. "What do you need?" In that moment, the air grew cold, and the shadows coalesced into a figure. A translucent image of Annabelle, her eyes filled with longing. "My story must be told," she pleaded. "I was betrayed by those I trusted. They took my life, but my truth remains buried." Understanding dawned on Sarah. "You want me to tell everyone what happened to you," she realized. "You want them to know the truth." "Yes," Annabelle whispered, her voice fading like a wisp of smoke. "Free me from this curse." With newfound determination, Sarah and Mia returned to Eldridge Hollow, armed with the truth. They gathered the townsfolk at the community center that evening, where Sarah recounted Annabelle's story. The betrayal, the the fears, and the lost potential of a life cut short. As she spoke, the atmosphere shifted. The room grew cold and whispers filled the air, echoing Annabelle's pain. The townsfolk listened, their expressions a mix of horror and compassion. By the end of the night, tears filled many eyes. They promised to honor Annabelle's memory and ensure her story was never forgotten. The curse that had once bound her to the locket began to lift, the weight of sorrow dissipating like morning mist. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she dreamed of Annabelle once more. This time, the girl smiled, her eyes sparkling with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and soothing. "I am free." When Sarah awoke, the locket lay on her nightstand, cold and still. She picked it up, her heart full. The curse had been broken, and the spirits of the lost were finally at peace. From that day forward, Sarah and Mia became local advocates for remembering those who had been forgotten, ensuring that every voice, every story would echo through the ages, unbound by the shackles of sorrow. Story the end.
Story number 7.
Shaker, the portrait of the forgotten. In the heart of Maplewood, a small town shrouded in mist and mystery, stood an old mansion known as Blackthorn Manor. The mansion had been abandoned for decades, its once grand facade now a crumbling relic. Locals avoided it, believing it to be cursed. Tales circulated of a family that had vanished within its walls, leaving behind only whispers of their fate. Curiosity drew a group of teenagers, Liam, Jenna, Ethan, and Ava, toward the manor one chilly autumn evening. They were eager to uncover the truth behind the haunted house, armed with flashlights and a thrill-seeking spirit. "This place has to be haunted," Ethan exclaimed, shivering as they approached the imposing front door. "I heard that the last family was never found." "Yeah, and that their portraits still hang inside, watching anyone who enters," Liam added, eyes wide with excitement. Jenna hesitated. "Are we really doing this? What if we get caught? Or worse?" "Oh, come on!" Ava laughed, pushing open the creaky door. "It's just an old house. Nothing's going to happen." The group stepped inside, the air heavy with dust and the scent of mildew. Shadows danced across the walls as they flicked on their flashlights, revealing faded wallpaper and broken furniture draped in sheets. The silence was palpable, broken only by the sound of their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. They explored the ground floor, the tension building, with every creak of the floorboards. As they made their way upstairs, they stumbled upon a room filled with portraits. Each painting depicted a member of the once wealthy family, their faces hauntingly beautiful, yet filled with an indescribable sadness. "Look at this one," Jenna said, pointing to a large portrait of a woman with striking blue eyes and dark hair, her expression frozen in a mix of sorrow and longing. "Who do you think she is?" "I think she's the last owner of the house, the one who disappeared," Liam said, intrigued. "Her name was Evelyn Blackthorn." As they continued to inspect the room, Jenna felt a sudden chill wash over her. "Guys, I don't like this. Let's go back." "Just a little longer," Liam insisted. "We're already here. Let's explore the rest of the house." Reluctantly, the group moved deeper into the manor. They found a library filled with dusty books and a grand dining room with a long table, set as if waiting for guests who would never arrive. But as they entered the last room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence enveloped them. In the center of the room stood a massive, ornate mirror, its surface clouded with age. Jenna felt an inexplicable pull toward it. "Do you guys feel that?" she whispered, stepping closer. "What are you talking about?" Ethan replied, but as he looked toward the mirror, his eyes widened in fear. "Guys, something's wrong." Suddenly, the mirror flickered, and an image appeared. Evelyn Blackthorn standing behind them, her expression mournful. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Screams erupted from the group as they turned to find nothing there. But when they looked back at the mirror, Evelyn's image remained, her eyes pleading. "Please, I cannot rest." Panic set in, and they stumbled back, desperate to escape. "We need to get out of here," Ava shouted, her voice shaking. But as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The lights flickered, and the temperature dropped even further. The whisper of Evelyn's voice echoed around them, wrapping them in a shroud of fear. "Why are you here?" Her voice rose to a wail. "You must find my locket. Only then can I be free." "Locket? What locket?" Liam shouted, his heart racing. Hidden in the attic, Evelyn's voice echoed, filled with anguish. "Bring it to me!" With no choice but to comply, the friends climbed the rickety staircase to the attic. The air grew thick with dust, and the smell of decay hung in the air. As they entered the attic, they were greeted by a sea of forgotten memories. old toys, furniture covered in white sheets, and boxes filled with the remnants of a lifelong lost. In the far corner, Jenna spotted a small, ornate box. "Over there," she cried, rushing toward it. Inside the box lay a delicate silver locket, its surface engraved with intricate patterns. As Jenna picked it up, a surge of energy coursed through her, and Evelyn's spirit materialized before them, her expression filled with hope. "You found it," she exclaimed, her voice clearer now. "Now you must release me. Tell us how," Ethan shouted, clutching Jenna's arm. "Open the locket and speak my name," Evelyn instructed. "Only then will I be free." With trembling hands, Jenna opened the locket, revealing a small portrait of Evelyn as a young girl. The image shimmered, and Jenna felt the room pulse with energy. "Evelyn Blackthorne," Jenna cried, her voice echoing. "We release you." A powerful wind surged through the attic, swirling around them, and Evelyn's spirit began to glow with a brilliant light. The portraits of the family in the other room began to shift and blur, their faces contorting in anguish as they too were drawn into the light. "Thank you," Evelyn's voice rang out, filled with gratitude. "I am free." With that, a blinding flash filled the room, and the group found themselves back in the main hallway, the door swinging open as if inviting them to leave. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, and the once haunting portraits now seemed peaceful, their sorrow replaced by a sense of calm. They rushed out of the house, laughter mingled with tears of relief. As they reached the front porch, Jenna turned to look back at Blackthorn Manor. The windows gleamed in the moonlight, and for the first time, the mansion seemed alive, a monument to the memories it held. From that day forward, the legend of Evelyn Blackthorne shifted from one of horror to one of hope. The townsfolk began to tell the story of the girl who had waited for her locket and the brave friends who had helped her find peace. As for Jenna and her friends, they learned that the past is not something to be feared, but a story waiting to be told, a reminder that love and compassion can transcend even the darkest of curses. Story the end.
Story number 8.
The Whispering Woods. In the small, fog-covered town of Everwood, a dense forest loomed on the outskirts, known to the locals as the Whispering Woods. For generations, tales of strange occurrences and disappearances surrounded the forest, keeping children and adults alike at a distance. It was said that the woods were alive, filled with the voices of the lost, bringing secrets and warnings to those brave or foolish enough to enter. One autumn afternoon, a group of 5 friends, Tom, Mia, Rachel, Ben, and Jake, decided to test the legends. The chill in the air hinted at the coming winter, but their youthful bravado pushed them forward. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they set out to explore the heart of the Whispering Woods. "This is going to be awesome," Tom exclaimed, leading the way. "I've heard stories about treasure hidden deep within the forest. Or maybe just more ghost stories," Mia replied, rolling her eyes but unable to hide her excitement. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees grew taller and thicker, their branches twisting into strange shapes that seemed to reach out like skeletal hands. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through the dense canopy, casting eerie shadows that danced on the ground. With every step, the air became heavier, as if the forest were holding its breath. "Do you guys hear that?" Rachel asked, pausing mid-step. The others fell silent, straining to listen. Faint whispers drifted through the trees, incomprehensible but persistent. "It's probably just the wind," Jake said, trying to dismiss the growing unease. "Let's keep going." They pressed on, the whispers growing louder as they moved deeper into the woods. The path twisted and turned, and the sunlight faded further. Eventually, they stumbled upon a clearing dominated by an ancient, gnarled tree. Its trunk was massive, and its roots twisted like serpents through the earth. "Look at this tree!" Ben exclaimed, running toward it. "It's huge!" As they gathered around the tree, they noticed strange carvings etched into the bark, symbols and words that seemed to pulse with energy. Mia traced her fingers over one of the carvings, and a shiver ran down her spine. "Guys, I don't like this. We should go back," she said, glancing nervously at the darkening forest. "Just a little longer," Tom urged, excitement lighting up his eyes. "We haven't found the treasure yet?" Suddenly, the wind picked up, and the whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tempest. The friends exchanged anxious glances as the air thickened, and a feeling of dread enveloped them. "Maybe we should really head back," Rachel suggested, her voice trembling. Before they could respond, the ground beneath them trembled, and the ancient tree creaked ominously. A low voice resonated through the clearing, echoing with sorrow. "Leave this place, or be lost forever." Panic surged through the group, and they turned to run. The path they had come from seemed to vanish, swallowed by the shadows. The trees closed in around them, and the whispers transformed into agonizing cries filled with despair. "Where's the way out?" Jake shouted, his voice rising in fear. "Just keep moving," Tom yelled, pushing forward, but every turn felt like they were only going deeper into the woods. As the darkness thickened, they stumbled into a hollow where an eerie mist curled around their feet. A faint light flickered in the distance, and they rushed toward it, hoping it might lead them to safety. The light led them to a decrepit cabin, half hidden by vines and moss. They hesitated at the door, fear coursing through them. "What if it's haunted?" Mia whispered. "There's no other choice," Ben said, his eyes darting around nervously. "We can't stay out here." With a deep breath, they pushed open the creaking door. Inside, the cabin was dimly lit by a single candle flickering on a rickety table. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and dust motes danced in the faint light. "What is this place?" Rachel murmured, stepping cautiously inside. The walls were lined with old photographs, their subjects faded and ghostly. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed outside, and the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The group jumped back, fear gripping their hearts. "We need to find a way out," Tom shouted, panic rising in his voice. As they frantically searched the cabin, the whispers grew louder, swirling around them, urging them to listen. "Help us. Free us. Who are you?" Mia cried out, her voice breaking. "What do you want?" "Find the key," the whispers echoed. "Unlock the truth." In that moment, Rachel noticed a small chest tucked away in the corner, covered in dust. "Look, over there," she pointed, and they gathered around it. With trembling hands, they pried it open. Inside lay a collection of old keys, tarnished and rusted, alongside a faded journal. The journal's pages were filled with frantic writing, recounting the story of a family that had lived in the cabin long ago, lost to the woods. "They were trapped here," Ben whispered, reading over Rachel's shoulder. "They never made it out." "We need to find the key that unlocks the door," Jake said, his voice filled with urgency. "It has to be here." They hurriedly sifted through the keys, but their hands trembled with fear. As the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony of cries, Rachel held up a key, its surface gleaming in the candlelight. "What about this one?" Tom took the key and rushed to the door, but as he turned it in the lock, a chilling wind howled through the cabin, extinguishing the candle. Darkness engulfed them, and the cries grew louder, echoing in their ears. "Tom, hurry!" Mia urged, her heart racing. With a click, the door swung open, revealing the swirling mist outside. The moment they stepped through, the whispers intensified, now pleading for release. The friends ran, their hearts pounding, desperately searching for the way back. "Keep going," Ben yelled, leading the charge through the thick trees. The path twisted and turned, but they focused on the distant flicker of sunlight breaking through the canopy. Just as the darkness threatened to close in around them, they burst into the clearing where they had first entered the woods. The ancient tree loomed before them, its branches reaching out like arms welcoming them back. "Run!" Tom shouted, and they sprinted toward the tree. As they crossed the threshold, the whispers erupted into a roar, filled with anguish, but slowly began to fade as they stepped into the sunlight. Panting, they turned back to look at the whispering woods. The trees swayed gently, their whispers now a distant echo. The air was calm, and the once oppressive atmosphere lifted. "We made it," Mia breathed, tears streaming down her face. "We actually made it. Let's never come back here again," Jake said, his voice shaky. "Agreed," Rachel nodded, her heart still racing. As they walked away from the forest, the sun setting behind them, they knew they had escaped a fate worse than death. The legends of the Whispering Woods had proven true, and the voices that haunted those trees would remain a warning for all who dared to enter. The friends vowed to share their story, ensuring that the memories of the lost souls in the woods would never be forgotten. They would honor those who had perished there and remind others to stay away, for the whispers held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. Story the end.
Story number 9.
The lanterns glow. In the quiet, coastal town of Crescent Bay, legends of the old lighthouse perched on the cliff had become a staple of local folklore. Abandoned for years, it was said to be haunted by the ghost of Captain Elias, a lighthouse keeper who vanished mysteriously one stormy night, leaving behind only his lantern. The townsfolk spoke in hushed tones of the flickering light that could sometimes be seen shining from the top of the lighthouse on stormy nights, guiding lost souls home. One evening, a group of adventurous friends, Sophie, Max, Clara, and Jamie, decided to explore the lighthouse. Sophie, the most spirited of the group, was convinced that the legend held a grain of truth. "It'll be fun," Just a little adventure, she urged, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Reluctantly, the others agreed, intrigued but apprehensive. As they made their way to the lighthouse, the salty sea air whipped around them, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. The path was overgrown, and the old building loomed ahead, silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Do you really think it's haunted?" Max asked, glancing nervously at the crumbling structure. "I mean, what if we actually see something?" "Don't be such a chicken," Clara teased, nudging him playfully. "It's just a spooky story." As they approached the door, a sudden gust of wind slammed it open with a deafening bang. Startled, the group exchanged worried glances, but pressed on, stepping inside the dusty, dark entryway. The smell of mildew filled the air, and cobwebs hung like veils from the rafters. With flashlights in hand, they began to explore. The beam of Sophie's flashlight flickered across the walls, revealing old photographs of Captain Elias and his family, their faces frozen in time. "Look at these," Sophie exclaimed, pointing at a particularly haunting portrait of the captain. His eyes seemed to follow them, filled with an unfathomable sadness. "Creepy," Jamie muttered, shivering. "Let's find that lantern and get out of here." They climbed the winding staircase, the old wood creaking beneath their feet. Each step echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. The air grew colder as they ascended, the darkness thickening around them. Finally, they reached the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse. The glass was dusty, and cobwebs adorned the corners. In the center stood the great lantern, its brass frame tarnished, but still majestic. Sophie approached it, awestruck. "Wow, it's beautiful," she whispered, reaching out to touch it. Just as her fingers brushed against the cold metal, the room filled with a low rumble, as if the lighthouse itself were awakening from a long slumber. "Did you feel that?" Max asked, his voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the lantern flickered to life, casting an eerie glow around the room. The flame danced wildly, illuminating the walls and revealing a faded map of the coast. Shadows twisted and turned, making it seem as if figures were moving just out of sight. "Okay, this is really freaky," Clara said, stepping back. "We should go. Now." As they turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. Panic surged through the group, and Sophie rushed back to the lantern, hoping to find some clue. "Look," she cried, pointing to the map. "It shows a shipwreck just off the coast. Maybe Captain Elias was trying to save someone." Just then, the whispers began, soft at first like a gentle breeze rustling through leaves, but they grew louder, turning into desperate cries. "Help me! Help us!" "What is that?" Jamie gasped, clutching Max's arm. "It's coming from the lantern," Clara shouted, her heart racing. The flames flickered wildly, casting erratic shadows across the room. Sophie felt a strange pull toward the lantern. "We have to help them," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Maybe if we light the lantern properly, we can set them free." The friends exchanged nervous glances, but knew they couldn't leave without trying. They searched for matches or oil to fuel the lantern. Max finally found a small tin of oil in a dusty corner, and they quickly poured it into the base of the lantern. "Okay, let's do this," Sophie said, her determination shining through the fear. She struck a match and lit the wick. As the flame grew, the whispers transformed into a cacophony of voices, filling the room with desperation. "Captain Elias, we're here!" Clara shouted, hoping to connect with the spirit. "We want to help." The lantern's glow intensified, casting blinding light across the room. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a translucent apparition of Captain Elias, his face etched with sorrow. "Why do you disturb my rest?" he asked, his voice echoing with the weight of the past. "We want to help you," Sophie said, her voice unwavering. "We saw the map and the shipwreck. Is that why you're trapped here?" The captain nodded, his expression shifting from anger to gratitude. "I lost my crew to the sea, and my spirit was bound to this lighthouse, unable to find peace until their souls were freed." "We can help you find them," Max offered, his heart racing. "Follow me," the captain commanded, his ghostly form floating toward the door. The group hesitated but followed him down the staircase, the whispers growing softer as they descended. Once outside, the wind picked up, guiding them toward the cliff's edge overlooking the turbulent ocean. "There!" Captain Elias pointed, and they followed his gaze to the rocks below, where the remnants of a shipwreck lay scattered in the waves. "Can you see them?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "They wait for me," he replied, his voice now a whisper. "You must light a fire to guide them home." Sophie and her friends quickly gathered driftwood and debris, working together to create a bonfire. As they lit it, the flames roared to life, casting a warm glow against the cold night. The captain watched, his eyes filled with hope. "Thank you," he whispered, his form shimmering with light. "You have freed me from this torment." The flames flickered and danced, and suddenly, ghostly figures began to emerge from the sea, their faces weary but filled with gratitude. Captain Elias stepped forward, his spirit merging with the glow of the lantern, illuminating the darkness. "We are free," the voices echoed, and as the light enveloped them, they began to rise, carried away on the winds of the night. Sophie, Max, Clara, and Jamie stood in awe, tears streaming down their faces as they watched the spirits of the crew ascend into the sky. The whispers faded, replaced by the gentle sound of the waves lapping at the shore. With dawn breaking, the friends turned to leave the lighthouse behind. As they made their way back down the path, they felt a profound sense of peace wash over them. The weight of the past had lifted, leaving behind a newfound lightness. They would return to Crescent Bay with stories to tell, tales of courage and compassion that would echo through the generations. The lighthouse would no longer be a place of fear, but a symbol of hope, a beacon guiding lost souls home. Story the end.
Story number 10.
Shaver, the House of Echoes. In the small town of Hillcrest, there stood a decrepit Victorian house at the end of a winding road. The locals whispered tales of its dark past, a history shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Known as the House of Echoes, it was said to be haunted by the spirits of a family who had mysteriously vanished decades ago, leaving behind nothing but an echo of their laughter and sorrow. Curiosity often got the better of four friends: Sam, Lily, Ethan, and Mia. They had grown up hearing the stories and finally decided one crisp autumn evening to explore the notorious house. Armed with flashlights and an insatiable sense of adventure, they made their way through the overgrown garden, the dying leaves crunching underfoot. "Are we really doing this?" Mia asked, her voice wavering as they approached the front door. "I mean, what if it's really haunted?" "Oh, come on! It'll be fun!" Sam replied, grinning. "Besides, it's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" As Sam pushed open the creaky door, a gust of stale air escaped, carrying with it the faint scent of decay. The interior was dimly lit, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light streaming through the cracked windows. The walls were adorned with faded wallpaper, peeling at the edges, and the floor creaked ominously under their weight. They stepped inside, their flashlights flickering as they illuminated the dark corners of the room. Shadows danced across the walls, and the atmosphere felt thick with history. "Let's check out the living room first," Ethan suggested, leading the way. As they entered, they were struck by the sight of an old grand piano, its keys yellowed with age. An unsettling stillness hung in the air. "Do you think it still works?" Lily asked, glancing at the dusty instrument. "Only one way to find out," Sam said with a laugh. He approached the piano and pressed a key, the sound echoing through the empty house. The note was discordant, but it resonated strangely in the silence. Suddenly, they heard a soft whisper, barely audible but distinct. "Play for us?" The group froze, their eyes wide with shock. "Did you hear that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. "It was probably just the wind," Ethan said, but even he wasn't convinced. "Let's explore upstairs," Lily suggested, eager to change the subject. The staircase loomed ahead, its railing warped and splintered. They ascended cautiously, the air growing colder as they reached the second floor. The hallway was lined with doors, each one closed and seemingly untouched for years. Sam approached the first door and pushed it open. Inside was a dusty bedroom, the bed draped in a yellowed sheet. As he stepped inside, he felt an inexplicable chill run down his spine. "Guys, come check this out," he called. The others followed, and they gazed around the room, noting the old toys scattered on the floor, remnants of a childhood long forgotten. "Look at this," Mia exclaimed, picking up a small, cracked porcelain doll. Its painted smile seemed to mock them, sending a shiver down her spine. As she held it up, the whispers returned, now more pronounced. "Help us." "Okay, this is getting weird," Ethan said, his unease palpable. "Let's move on." They continued down the hallway, opening doors and finding more remnants of the family's life. Old photographs, clothes left hanging in closets, and toys collecting dust. Each room seemed to echo with the laughter and sorrow of its former inhabitants. As they reached the end of the hallway, they came upon a door that appeared different from the others. Its wood was darker, almost black, and a faint light flickered beneath it. Curiosity piqued, they exchanged nervous glances before Sam pushed the door open. Inside was a dimly lit attic, cluttered with old trunks and furniture draped in sheets, but it was the flickering light that captured their attention. In the center of the room stood an antique lamp, its glow pulsating softly as if alive. "Wow, check this out," Lily said, walking toward the lamp. As she reached for it, the whispers crescendoed into frantic pleas. Help us! Remember us! Startled, Lily pulled her hand back. What is going on? Before anyone could respond, the room began to tremble and a cold wind swept through the attic, extinguishing the lamp. The air turned heavy, filled with a palpable sense of despair. Get out! A voice roared, echoing around them. You're not welcome here! Panic surged through the group as they turned to flee, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Sam, what do we do? Mia shouted, her eyes wide with fear. Look for another way out, he yelled back, frantically searching the room. Ethan noticed a small window in the far corner. Over there, we can get out through that window. As they rushed toward it, the whispers returned, now a chorus of sorrowful voices. Don't leave us. Remember us? Who are you? Lily cried, desperation creeping into her voice. What do you want? The whispers grew louder, echoing their own names. Sam, Lily, Ethan, Mia, help us. Realization washed over them. They want us to remember them, Ethan said, his voice trembling. They're trapped in this house. Maybe if we tell their story, it will free them, Sam suggested, glancing at the trunk in the corner. There has to be something in there. They hurried over and pried the trunk open. Inside, they found an old journal, its pages yellowed and fragile. As they flipped through it, they discovered the story of the family, how they had lived, loved, and ultimately vanished under mysterious circumstances. They need us to share their story, Mia said, tears in her eyes. We can't let them be forgotten. With newfound determination, they began to read aloud from the journal, the words flowing like a haunting melody. As they spoke, the atmosphere shifted, the air growing lighter with each sentence. The whispers transformed, no longer filled with desperation, but instead resonating with gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for remembering. As they finished reading, the room trembled once more, but this time it felt different. The oppressive weight began to lift, and the door creaked open slowly as if inviting them to leave. Let's go, Sam urged, and they hurried out of the attic, down the stairs, and through the front door, stepping back into the cool night air. As they stood outside, the house seemed to breathe, a sigh of relief echoing from within its walls. The once haunting whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. They looked back at the House of Echoes, now just a building, its spirits finally at peace. We did it, Lily said, her voice filled with awe. Yeah, Ethan replied, a smile breaking through his earlier fear. We remembered them. From that day forward, the friends shared the story of the family from the House of Echoes, ensuring that their laughter and sorrow would never be forgotten. They learned that sometimes the most haunted places carry the weight of untold stories, waiting for someone to listen. Story the end.